Paul, you're having too much fun. You are. There's too many topics, and you're having a field day here. Would the Jim Harbaugh situation happen in the SEC?
No. And part of the reason, Dan, is that the SEC doesn't do everything right, but they do keep things pretty buttoned down. And this blew up about 13 years ago. Remember when Lane Kiffin, that Lane Kiffin went to Tennessee? He immediately called out Urban Meyer for being a cheater, which was great theater. I know it even got to your studio. And it went on for a while, and it turned out that he was wrong. So anyway, move the calendar up. We're now in May at the SEC spring meetings in Destin, and there's this room at the time I think there were 12 SEC head coaches and the commissioner Mike Slide. The guy Mike was, intellectual lawyer, 5'9", 139 pounds. I think I was describing myself there, and they're in the room, and Kiffin and Urban start going at it. And finally, Slibe just slammed his fist through the table, and Lane interrupted, and he said, "Effing shut up, Lane." And the room went quiet, and I'm told reliably that Nick Saban and Urban Meyer had the biggest grins in the room. And that was it. He said, "We're not doing this anymore." He said, "If you got a problem, you call me. You don't go public." And interestingly, Dan, there's been a lot of accusations privately, and I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is the way it has been. The SEC buttoned down and no longer was a civil war, just like what we're seeing in the Big Ten.
Okay, but we had this moment. What was it last year, the year before, with Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban, and I know where the bodies are buried, but it died.
It died because it got the commissioner buttoned it down and said enough. And by the way, who won that battle between Saban and Jimbo Fisher?
But no reporters really followed up.
No, and I'm not advocating that. You know my background. That drives me crazy. But it's almost a new normal. And I'm not suggesting, before anybody jumps to too many conclusions, that cheating is tolerated. They just deal with it in a different way. And I think even the Big Ten has done that. Most conferences do that. That's why this is such an outlier. And the antagonism from Michigan toward Tony Petitti last week was really surprising and shocking. And I know everybody's joking. What if Petitti has to give the trophy in 2 weeks to Harbaugh? I mean, you've been there. You've done the trophy celebrations at the Super Bowl when there was animus toward Roger Goodell and others. And it's just it's amazing, especially when you look at the university president at Michigan, Santo Ono, who's fairly new on the job, and I fully expect next Saturday him to lead the team out of the tunnel, waving pom-poms with some of the comments that he's been making.
What do you expect to happen tomorrow at this hearing with Harbaugh?
I think if you use practical legal knowledge, they won't give it. But then again, if this was in Tuscaloosa, if this was in Columbus, Ohio, would it be granted? Yes, it would be.
You think so? If this was heard in Columbus, would Michigan?
No. I mean, excuse me. I mean, if it had been Ryan Day in Columbus.
Oh, or Nick Saban,
okay. Yeah, no, please, no. I think the hometown nature, and we all want to believe that judges are beyond reproach, but I don't know. I've been reading a lot about the Supreme Court lately that makes me wonder if they can't be influenced.
What bothers you the most about this cheating scandal?
Michigan fans. Because that's who I mean, Harbaugh is Harbaugh. I mean, his press conference the other day was classic Jim Harbaugh. Didn't make any sense, a lot of non sequiturs, but that's who he is. But the fan reaction and some of the sycophants who have stood up for them. And I know a lot of people in the media business, are trying to put this as a Fox versus ESPN deal. Yeah. Nobody's telling people at ESPN what to say. I can assure you of that. I don't know if you could say the same thing about what we hear on Fox. I mean, it's comical to watch that Fox show on Saturday and to listen. I mean, to listen to Urban Meyer of all people shill for Michigan. That's beyond the pale.
Well, you have Desmond Howard on your roster.
Well, I'm going to say how much I respect Desmond.
Of course you do. Of course.
What a fine teammate he is. But I did appreciate his legal advice the other day on Get Up. I thought that was very helpful for my my law practice.
Harbaugh, they don't have the compass doesn't point towards them admitting anything. Like they're a victim, they're America's team, due process. But it still feels like they did something wrong. They just don't want to be punished this way for doing something wrong.
Dan, they did something wrong. Whether Harbaugh ordered it or not, he's responsible. That's what the rule book says, whether you like the rules of the NCAA or not. And I don't. And, I have friends who say, well, the NCAA is out to get them. But if you go back, if Jim Harbaugh had just agreed to dismiss whatever these allegations were during COVID, level 2 allegation, it would be over, but he wouldn't. I mean, Jim Harbaugh he's so recalcitrant. He just wouldn't admit to doing anything. I mean, he's one of those, we all know people like that from high school until right now that will never admit that they're wrong. And that's what gets him in trouble every time. And I think whether the NCAA had an axe to grind or not, he pushed them to this point. But I think all these other coaches coming in, you hear from coaches, I hear from coaches, and they all believe, the ones I hear from, I should say, that Harbaugh gained not a slight advantage, but a significant advantage, and something should be done. And I frankly don't think a 3-game suspension is that big of a deal, even considering the weight of next week's game. I think if Petiti had turned his head, then it would have looked ridiculous. I applaud him for doing it. And whether it goes anywhere from here, it probably won't, because the NCAA is not really equipped any longer to do an investigation under 3 or 4 years.
If Michigan wins the national title, will you recognize them as national champs?
I will refuse to recognize Michigan as the national champs. I was taught that athletics should be an even playing field, and to me, they are not subscribing to that.
Was last week a good week for Texas A&M?
No, but I think it was necessary. And, we're talking about $77 million. I mean, it was self-inflicted, but in fairness, and I know this will sound crazy, but the AD was not the AD that hired Jimbo. The AD that hired Jimbo, was trying to hire Jimbo again. I mean, can you imagine if he'd gotten stuck with him twice, to LSU, and A&M did not want to lose the momentum. And Dan, I know everybody, is working hard trying to make a living, but in Texas, $77 million is really not a lot of money. That's just a good day in the oil market. So they covered it.
Well, is this a big time job? Is A&M a big time job?
I think it can be. And I've been there so many times and I've seen it is set up perfectly. And I threw this out the other day and people scoffed. I thought a guy like Dabo Swinney would be perfect there. He's somewhat narrow-minded. He fits the culture in terms of button down. He's been late to the portal. He's been late to NIL, but he's a good football coach. And he also has been to 6 playoffs and has won 2 national championships. It's not the same as bringing a beaten down Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. I mean, Dabo has some issues. I mean, he's frustrated because he doesn't have Trevor Lawrence and he doesn't have Deshaun Watson. But I think someone like that would work. I think that it's a very important selection, though. If they blow this, then where do they go?